Special thanks to WaterStone for sponsoring Socrates in the Studio Season 3.
So why are they upset? I say that we're teaching children small c conservative values. They don't like the word conservative. It makes them very upset. They especially, I think, don't like it when a woman of my color is saying that. I'm not allowed to.
You're not allowed to say that.
No.
No, people of your color can only speak one way.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
the rule. But we don't believe in rules. We believe in anarchy. But that's different. But your school you were billed as the strictest headmistress in the UK. You believe in rules and order.
Yes.
Which
they also don't like that.
Most people know that can go too far. But in the last 50 or so years, it's been the baby's been thrown out with the bathwater, where there's very little of that. I remember already in the 70s when I was in school, they had, there's an experimental school across town where there are no classrooms, or there's
no walls,
or there are no grades, or there's no walls, or this kind of stuff. And of course, that's carried on for decades until you have chaos. And I assume that was the chaos you were dealing with in these inner city schools.
Yeah. So absolutely, your man John Dewey is, he's at fault, and Rousseau is at fault with, you need to draw it out of the child instead of putting it into the child. I mean, come on. We're adults. We know more than children. We should be telling them stuff and teaching them stuff instead of allowing them to sit in groups and lead the learning, because there's no adult who can be an authority in the room.
Well, it's interesting because it's a Socrates in the City conversation. I have to go to the things that are antecedent to what you've just done that by mentioning Rousseau and Dewey. There are fundamental ideas which we would say are mistaken, but that they have been really foisted on children and families. And you saw, because you were there, that those ideas were failing.
Exactly. So the thing is, I used to be a sort of typical left-leaning teacher. When I was at university, I read Living Marxism, and I was very much a lefty teacher. And then I went into teaching and started trying out all the ideas that you were taught at teacher training college and so on. And then I came to realize slowly, wait a minute, this stuff isn't working. And actually, if I just go back to basics and do more of the sort of conservative stuff, which just comes naturally to you, actually. I think if you take a child who's 12 and she puts out her dolls and she teaches them with her pretend little blackboard, she will do what we do at Michaela, which is teach them stuff and then test them on it. You'll have a class discussion. You'll have some exercises to do. You'll write stuff down instead of having a Chromebook or an iPad in every classroom, and smartphones and earphones in, and general rudeness with children with their hands in their pockets and just slouching around all over the place. Now, when I say that sort of thing now, they say, oh, Katharine, come on, calm down. What's the big deal? And I just think, well, it's our duty, obviously, to help children be the best that they can be.
It's this, I don't know who said it, but it's the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Bush.
The idea. Who
George
said that?
Bush said it.
Did he? Well, he didn't write it, but but the idea that we can't push them too hard, the poor things.
Yes.
And that's a lie.
Yes.
And so you have dedicated
yourself.
yourself.
Because I tell you what happens is you don't push them because you feel sorry for them. And then they do really badly. And then what you say, if you're on the left, you say, oh, well, you know what we need to do? We need to have quotas. So we'll just push them in at age 20 into some job that they don't have the skills for because we never taught them the skills. But it's okay because we'll pepper around some black faces and some poor faces and some, various people so it looks like it's a diverse intake. And then we feel good about ourselves. But what's important is that the children be taught the skills and the knowledge that they need to be able to lead an interesting life.
So in your mind, what is classical education? And the bigger question is, because I'm talking about the West, is classical education, to your mind, key to the future of the West, if the West is to have a future?
Yes, well, it's interesting. I mean, classical education, it depends. I wouldn't necessarily describe us as a classical education school. Certainly the classical education schools in the US, they want to teach a lot of Plato and Aristotle and we don't necessarily do that at our school, but I think where we're at 100% in agreement is that, you want to teach some of the greats. You want to teach the dead white men. The thing I always think that's interesting about dead white men is everybody always concentrates on the white bit and on the men bit, when actually the bit that's most important is the dead bit. They're dead. That's why we want to teach them. Shakespeare's been dead for 400 years, and he's been influencing literature for 400 years, which is why he's interesting. The guy who's writing right now, maybe one day he'll be really interesting in 400 years, but right now it's Shakespeare who's the guy we should be teaching. But because he's also white and male, we jump around and say, oh my goodness, we don't want to teach him. It's ridiculous. And it's also the case for Charles Dickens and so on. And the fact is that if you want children to be British or American, you've got to look at your history and teach them the history of your country, the geography of your country, and the literature and the artists and the musicians and so on and so forth. Now, of course, in America, you do have more of a diverse historical literature. You've got James Baldwin and you've got Maya Angelou and so on and so forth, who you can teach. Less so in this country. There are little bits, and of course those can be taught, but there's less of it here. But what's important is not to choose people because of the color of their skin, but because they belong in the canon, because their writing is such that it deserves to be there.
But you realize, just as you talk, you're pushing all these hot buttons. The very idea of a canon, the very idea of making the judgment call that Shakespeare is great,
yes,
and whatever novel came out 5 years ago is not as great. That, in other words, if we're going to talk about the values that would undergird the West, or that would help kids get educated, it's a minefield for people today, because they are troubled by these very ideas.
Yes. No, that's right. Because they see everything through the lens of identity politics. And they don't understand that people are so much more than their race, their gender, their sexuality, their religion. And it's because they're all clamoring up that mountain of victimhood to try and claim that they are the biggest victim, when actually, whatever it is, whatever obstacles there have been in your life, it may be race, it may be gender, it may be that your mother died when you were 6 years old, it may be that you had a hard life at home and nobody actually knows this. The thing about race is that it's obvious. You can see it on someone. But there are a whole variety of obstacles that people will have been jumping over, who may not be, black or brown, etc. The fact is that there are obstacles. It's what makes life interesting. Frankly, it's through jumping over those obstacles and learning how to succeed despite those obstacles. That's what brings meaning to your life. You'll find many a trust fund kid who ends up really quite depressed and miserable because everything's been given to them. You don't want that, right? What you want is not too many obstacles, because there are too many, but you want some obstacles, and then you want the skills and the knowledge and the practice and the habits the habits of mind, to be able to overcome those obstacles. And the only way you do that is if you stress test children, put them in an environment, in a school, which gives them lots of knowledge and tests them on it and gives them opportunities to try out new things and to find the stuff that inspires them so that they can make a life for themselves. But if you're going around thinking, oh my goodness, but you come from a poor background, I can't possibly give you homework because you don't have a desk at home. Well, great. And when they become functionally illiterate, well, you're to blame, teacher, because you're the one that wouldn't stress test them. And, I'm not saying it's not harder for the kid who lives in the inner city, who doesn't have a desk at home and whose dad beats his mom or whatever it is. Yes, it's harder for him. But that's the one life he's got. We've only got one life. You've got to deal the cards you've got, right? And then you got to make the most of it. Because suddenly, bing, in a minute, you're 75, right? And that's it.